Welcome to Business Savages with your host, Olia Gravel. This is the meeting place for Entrepreneur Anonymous, where stories that never get published on LinkedIn come to the surface. In each episode, we invite an entrepreneur to share their raw, unfiltered journey and the lessons they've learned from it. Whether you're in the trenches seeking validation or advice, or simply wondering if starting is even worth it, this is your space. Thanks for joining us today, and let the confession booth begin. All right, guys, welcome back to Business Savages. Today I have a very interesting guest. It's very rare that I meet one of those rare human beings who knew who they wanted to be when growing up. Please welcome Tom, and I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Thank you very much. So my name is Tom Cullen. I'm the founder of Zopla, a Gen Z opinion sharing app where we help Gen Z understand the world and the world understand Gen Z. I'm from Leeds and my background actually began in investment banking where I worked for 4 years on the trading floor before quitting my job to launch Zopla 2 years ago.
So Tom told me in our warm-up that he just knew from the early age that investment banking is where he wanted to be. Tell us a little bit more about that, because I know it's super rare. A lot of people are just kind of like stumbling through college or do whatever their parents think is best. So I think it's very interesting to get your perspective here.
Yeah, so it's quite strange because most kids, when they're growing up, when they're teenagers, they want to be, professional footballers, maybe still want to be an astronaut.
Right.
They want to do a really cool job. They want to be like a professional wrestler. From probably being about 12, 13, I wanted to go work at an investment bank. And I still don't think I actually knew what an investment bank did until maybe I was like 16. But it's something that was in my head all throughout being a teenager. And I look back and I remember one of the Christmases when I was in year 10, I asked my brother to buy me like financial markets textbook. So which probably seemed quite strange at the time, but I always had this determination that I wanted to go and end up working on the trading floor at an investment bank.
Was it the image of an investment banker that was attractive, or was it more so the possibility of making, shit ton of money?
Yeah, it's probably both. As I mentioned, growing up, we were very poor. I was on free school meals, so I think that was definitely attractive to me. That idea that you can go out there and make a load of money, but wasn't necessarily that I was. Because you can make and even growing up, I grew up around just after I was born in the 90s, grew up on the turn of the internet. There's a lot of ways where you can go make a lot of money online without having to follow the traditional career paths. But for me, it was kind of what it symbolized. I always looked at one of the hardest things to do. It was a challenge. It meant having to like grow and develop as a person, and like build your skill set. No one around me was in that world, from Leeds. It was a completely alien world, the big city of London. So I think it was the challenge and what it symbolized to me in terms of becoming as a person, as well as you can make a lot of money.
Very interesting. So it was also a challenge. Did you, on the level of 0 to holy shit, I don't know how I'm going to do it, how intimidating was it?
Yeah, so I think the big goals are scary. So big goals are really intimidating. And here's the thing, people often think, people will see other people and they'll be like, oh, well, they knew how to get there. Like a lot of people, a lot of my friends from background will ask me, how did you know how to do that? And I'm like, I had no idea. I just figure things out one step at a time. And I think it's that view on, do you look at a big intimidating goal and be like, okay, I don't know how to get from A to Z? Or do you look at that and be like, well, I can kind of go to B and then maybe that'll get me somewhere, which I can then get somewhere else from. Because my route there actually wasn't, I just go to uni, apply for internship. It was go to uni, got rejected by everyone, was like, okay, I need some experience. So I'll start my own website selling ebooks, which was really cringy and embarrassing when I looked at it. And then that got me an internship at financial services firm, EY, and then leveraged that to basically give myself credibility to go launch our investment society, built that, to then go again and apply for internships. So it's about kind of stacking these small wins and building the big goal from the much smaller goals.
So from everything that I'm hearing and from what I've heard in the warm up, well, you're clearly able to let's put it like keep your eyes on the prize, as in
Mm.
like you can see like the end game, but also at the same time you seem to have this confidence in you that is basically like, you know what, it's probably gonna crash and burn,
Mm.
but it's fine. Where do you think that confidence is coming from?
Yeah, so I think as we spoke about, I think a lot of these qualities are developed in the early years. I think they're developed, and you can develop them later. So I don't think it's, if you don't think you're that type of person now, I don't think you should ever worry because everything can be developed and everything can
Mm-hmm.
be taught. But I think a lot of it stems to your early years. And a lot of my confidence, as we mentioned, came from, had a stay at home mum who's very loving, very caring. So I had that emotional support, which allowed me to go out and feel like I could fail. Because, I don't need to ever worry about disappointing my parents. They don't care what I do. They're still going to love me. Um, so it was always like when you're kind of coming from that, you feel like you're coming from the bottom. You can't go any lower, right? If you
Right.
fail, you're back in the
Mm-hmm.
same spot.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I've always had that sense of fearlessness when it came to taking risks as well. I can go for the big prizes, the big goals, because actually, if I fail, it doesn't really matter. I'm still going to be at the same spot I am. I have zero fear of failure as well, which I think helps.
Oh, definitely does. You just mentioned something very interesting that you think this quality, like the confidence of the fearlessness can be developed. Are you speaking from experience as in you've seen somebody develop it, or is it more so your general understanding of it?
Yeah, so I think everything is, it's more of, so experience helps you develop. So, it's like going into the forest. When you look at a scary forest from the outside, you're thinking all the bad things that can happen. You don't know how to approach it. When you go into the forest and you take your first 5 steps in, you can see the dangerous bugs. You start to become familiar with your surroundings. There's a chimp up in that tree that's going to attack me. You become familiar with unfamiliar surroundings. So I think it's definitely a case of you can be taught it, but that comes through experience. I think no one starts off on this journey being familiar and knowing what to do in every situation. They put themselves in the small, manageable situations. They get experience and they go and keep doing that. And over time, that builds up and accumulates.
I want to say it was definitely the case for me, and it's more so, I guess, in my later 20s, and especially
Mm.
now in my early 30s, because I would always apply for a job where I did not necessarily have the entire skill set. I'll be just like,
Yeah,
figure it out. I'll bullshit through the interview and I'll figure it out. But I just always knew I would be able to like
yeah,
come up to the level needed afterwards. Because, oh, and this is, by the way, this is going to be my next question. Your superpower. I don't always ask it, but I want to ask you. I want to ask you. So my superpower is learning.
yeah,
I can learn a new thing in like 10 seconds. Like is as long as I put my mind to it, like I can literally accomplish
mm,
anything. And it has been my thing from the very beginning. Like as long as I remember. So for example, exams, I would only study the night before, like all the time. It was never a thing that I would actually take the time because I knew I could do it in like 24 hours. So
yeah.
what's your superpower?
Oh, so can I give two answers for this?
Of course.
So one of my first superpowers is humor. I feel like when you use humor like correctly, it's one of the most powerful tools ever. Like being the
So
class
true.
clown can pay off later down the
Yeah.
line. Like being quirky and not like deliberately being like an inauthentic
Right.
quirky, but um, not be not being afraid to have fun and have a laugh with people. Now obviously there's times where that isn't appropriate, but I think no matter what you're doing, people who are posting on LinkedIn, and I teach anyone who interns us, I'm like, have character in what you post because no one wants a generic, kind of very formulaic corporate speak post. No one's going to read that. No one's going to be interested. Add a little bit of humor, add some personality into it. Um, and I try to do that with everything I do, which has taken me to building, a Gen Z polling app, which we got all our users from creating, funny TikTok content. So I used my own humor, my own sense of humor to get all our users basically. So my first superpower. My second superpower is teaching people. So I think I'm quite good at like explaining complex concepts. I'm very much of a person. I think you get like there's two extremes. There's people who will, when they're explaining something to you, they want to sound smart, so they'll explain it in a way that's really difficult for you to understand. And
Yeah,
with
that's
all of
true.
those people, you're sat there
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
dropping acronyms in there. They're talking about complex concepts that they don't really understand, but they know you don't, and they want to seem like they're intelligent and they know more than you. And then you get the other spectrum, which is people will make things sound so easy and so simple. You'll think, I'm a master in this topic now, despite you're kind of told the same content information, but the way you're told it is very different. And I think that is one of my superpowers, that I try and make things as simple and easy for people as possible.
I think that would be my second superpower too. And I love it. Like I love teaching people and actually like being able to see that they've got it. Like
Yeah.
for me, it's like yes, yes, accomplished. Humor thing is also very interesting because from the research that I read about it, because I've also became like a first class clown lately. Because it's like, I mean, this is like became not that it became part of my personality. It has always been part of my personality, but I didn't want to own it.
Yeah.
And now finally I'm like, yes, I'm the goofball in the room, and I'm loving it. So apparently it also has to do with confidence.
Yeah.
So there are two types of people who like to make other people laugh. Ones that are super confident and they don't actually, they're not afraid of like making fun of themselves to make
Yeah.
other people laugh. And there are others who are like completely different spectrum. They're like depressed
Yeah.
and they would make other people laugh for, I can't remember the exact explanation. Obviously, I'm not a psychologist, but I thought it was super peculiar that it's like either one or the complete opposite.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the latter is a lot of people, right? Humor, you're making up for humor and making other people happy because there's something missing in yourself. And I think that's
Right.
like you get, you mentioned kind of depression, where you see a lot of comedians, a lot of very famous comedians who, some of the funniest people on the planet, and they'll come out saying, I had really bad depression. It was
Right.
a horrible period of their life. Yeah, they were the funniest they've ever been. So I do think the two are related. I also think when you have a very like sort of a pessimistic view on the world, when you have that like negative spin on things, you actually see things in a really perceptive way. And humor's, it's about subverting expectations, interesting insights in a perceptive way. And I think when you're going through those, types of emotions, you just have interesting takes that are funny because they're not the takes you kind of expect, if that makes sense.
It does. It absolutely does. Um, when did you realize that those were your superpowers? Was that like just like did you have to process it, or was it just like always there and finally like, yep, this is just what I'm good at?
Yeah, so teaching knew from like at university, as part of setting up like our investment society, I would teach people finance. So I'd go learn finance, the knowledge that day, and then teach them later that day. Um,
Sounds like
which,
me.
yeah, which is quite risky. I developed a lot of tactics when people ask questions I didn't know. Anyone ever wants to know them, feel free to drop me a message. Um, but yes, at university, I learned I was quite good at teaching people. I mean, humor just all through my life, really. Like growing up in school, always wanted to, like, and enjoyed making people laugh. So yeah, but like you said about owning it, I don't think I really owned it in a professional sense until maybe like probably about 2 years after I started working in investment banking. And then you realize you can have more character and
Mm-hmm.
personality. And if that
Mm-hmm.
includes humor, you can kind of use that in the appropriate way. Um, and then, yeah, teaching, as soon as I realized that was my superpower, I owned it like right then and there.
That's awesome. Where were you in your career when The Wolf of Wall Street came out?
So I was at uni when The Wolf of Wall Street came out. I was in my first, I think it came out in 2013, if I'm right. Don't quote me on that, but I think
Sure.
I was in my first year of uni when it came out.
Did it like strengthen the idea that this is the right path?
Do you know what? Actually, it had somewhat of the opposite effect because
Okay.
it was like
Oh,
I
because you
always,
saw like the dark side.
yeah, and it was more like because how I'd always looked at it was, oh, you have to develop like uh you have to develop these skills and these personality traits. So you have to like top of your game, like top tier. And then obviously it came out and you're like, oh wait, so people are making loads of money from like the horrible dark side of it. And it kind of tainted it a little bit. But yes, quite a strange one really, because you'd think Wolf of Wall Street was kind of inspiring, but actually it's when you look at it and you're like, what if that, and the industry isn't like that anymore? But actually,
Right.
like that's the industry. I don't think that's not what I thought in my mind. I was like, these are the the best people on the planet, not the other kind.
I think I personally got fascinated. I saw it twice, like once when it came out and
Yeah,
once recently. To be honest, I do not remember what I thought about it when it first came out, but the second time was maybe around a year ago, and I just got fascinated with the whole like sales side of it. I was like,
yeah,
holy shit, so you can actually sell anything to anyone. You
yeah.
just like have to know how to communicate. Like this is all that it's
Mm.
about.
And I've always like I've been a huge believer in that like people if you think about like humans from a very very like fundamental like the very like first principles, there were huge narratives in society that people believe and they just are not true. Um, you could all have a guess what I'm implicitly saying there, but there's a lot of things people believe that aren't true, and people will buy things that are, I don't want to say nonsense, but like somewhat
Hmm.
nonsense based on those beliefs. We can think meme coin galore, right? On people who believed it was going to be a frontier technology, whether they believe that, I'm not sure, bought into like crappy meme coins that were just crazy behavior. I mean, isn't crazy behavior because they're trying to make money, but my point being that you can, depending on how you frame things, you can really, like, there's going to be people out there who will buy something that you're trying to sell if you frame it in the right way. Um,
Oh, so you're talking about like cognitive biases,
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
hmm
yeah. So, like, sales is about how do you frame something in a way that the
right?
person you're talking to wants that. Like, how do you find out what their like innate desire is? How do you communicate it to them? So I kind of from that agree with you. I think you can sell anything if you're good at communicating with people and understanding people.
Absolutely. Did you have, it's completely out of curiosity, are there any like psychology classes in the investment banking specialty?
There's not, but I have read quite a lot of books on them. There's a really good book I'm reading at the minute, actually. It's called Predictably Irrational. Um,
Okay, it's on my list. Is it
yeah,
good?
it's good. But I've read quite a lot of books, read a lot into like the different cognitive biases. And I actually wrote a document I sent round when I was working in banking. I like applied it to like the sales process. So it was like all the biases people have, and then how do we specifically apply it to what we do? So I'll teach you a really good one. Okay. So anyone who's two really good ones, if you're working in a corporate job and you're dealing with clients, so like let's say you call me, I'm going to answer the phone. I don't know who it is, but I probably do know who it is because I'm either expecting a call, recognize the number. I pretend I don't know who it is. And it's like, Brian calls me and I'm like, hello, Tom speaking. And then he's like, oh, hi, Tom, it's Brian. As soon as he says that, my tone changes. I'm like, oh, hi, Brian. How are you? Good to hear from you. And it's just like the most simplest trick ever. But like, and you even do that if you know who's calling. Uh,
Right.
so then they feel like, as that psychological, as soon as they say their name, how positively you're responding to that, um, rather than just kind of the monotone standard where you might answer the phone.
So you're making them, I guess you're making them
Feel
valuable.
special.
Like the,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
feel
exactly,
special.
exactly.
Like as soon as when they call you, your voice is deliberately monotone, not very enthusiastic, and as soon as they say their name and announce who they are, it completely switches. You're happy to hear from them. We all love those friends who will walk into a bar or whatever and they're running up and like, so good to see you, and they're so happy to see you. Like how it makes you feel inside is really good. And you can just take that and do that on a very micro level on the day to day. Every time you answer a call to someone, you can even do it on the email, but it doesn't work as well over email.
Very interesting. I think there was a study about the name, actually, not even just like overall tone of just like joyfulness you
Mm.
express towards people, but the name, like
Yeah,
using their people's name. There is like something to it. Again, oh my gosh, I feel like I have memory problems at this point. Maybe it's like the toddler brain in me. But for sure, when somebody's using my name in the conversation, I feel like I'm focusing more,
yeah.
and it's also like this inserts a special something into it that
Mm.
it just makes me like perk up a little bit, you know.
Yeah, there's another one as well. So it's like, so let's say you're having a conversation with someone, in your
So this is the
conversation,
second. This is the second technique.
this is well,
Okay.
there's this you can we'll class this as the second one. So let's say you're having a conversation with someone, what a lot of people aren't consciously thinking about is like their body language. So like, let's say I'm chatting to a colleague at work or whatever. Have you ever heard of that? Depending on how far away you stand from someone, you should stand that far away depending on the setting. So if he's very formal, you don't know them well, you should be like, you know, 2 meters away, let's say, and then 100
Right.
meters away if you know him better. And if it's a close friend, when you're chatting to him, you go like in closer when you say things. It's kind of like you're telling them a secret. You lean into a conversation. Like just doing that in conversations, you can really change like how somebody thinks and feels depending on your body language and whether you're leaning into that conversation. It's like it's an old friend, you're telling them a secret. It makes them feel like subconsciously, and they don't realize that you're like 30 centimeters closer than
Right. Right.
what you'd expect, but they associate that with, like close friends, trustworthiness. Um, so yeah, definitely changing how far away and how much you lean in and don't lean in when you're chatting with people can massively affect their psychology when it comes to liking you and feeling closeness with you.
I think it's also has to do like with the physical touch. Like
Mm.
this is like the next level. That's what I've also heard is basically obviously I'm not talking about like hugging
Yeah,
there, but
yeah,
just
yeah,
like,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, like just like a slight touch on the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
shoulder, like when you're saying something. And but it can obviously go like wildly wrong in different cultures because there are some cultures that just see it as offensive.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, for example, in the US it's totally cool. It's just like, you know, tap on the
Yeah,
shoulder,
yeah, yeah.
whatever. Like also people like doing this, just kind of like
Yeah, yeah,
grabbing the
yeah, yeah.
forearm. And I've definitely never been a toucher in my life. Like,
Mhm.
I grew up in Russia, so there it's like, I mean, I'm gonna take it out of proportion, but we like don't even hug in the
Yeah,
family,
yeah.
and which is like totally fine. Like, you know, it's just like we're more like verbally expressive, but
Mm.
it's not about like the physical proximity of the person, I guess. And I remember when I got to the US and people were like more touchy and feely. And
Mm.
now in France, it's like even more. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, like what is happening, you know?
But it's funny because I'm the same as you. So I'm naturally like, I'm not a touchy person at all. Like I'm a person who I like my personal space. But it's these things you kind of have to be, I think you learn and you have to be conscious because I'm not like a touchy person.
Yes,
It's like,
yes.
the like,
Hmm.
it's more to like signal things. Like if you're going in and you're telling them something, it's like a touch on the shoulder. And I feel like if you're not naturally inclined to do that, something you have to be so conscious of doing, because it doesn't come naturally to me at all.
Yeah, neither. I want to say, like in the last year, I've totally changed. Like I
Mm.
just do it naturally now, and I'm like,
Yeah.
whoa, like
Mm.
what's wrong with me? But like I actually want to, and
Yeah.
I feel like it also comes off a lot more naturally versus me. Like for example, even a couple years back, because I watched all this like French people how they operate in
Yeah.
professional environment. It was like a lot of touching and blah blah blah,
Yeah.
and I was just like, you know, like doing it because I knew I had to, but I think it was so awkward because it
Yeah.
wasn't natural.
100%. And I think like when it does become, I think a lot of these techniques as well, like these kind of psychological, like tiny psychological like biases that you can influence via, your actions. I feel like a lot of them, they become very natural when you keep them in your conscious thought. So whenever I read any book, like if you read a book on psychological biases, for example, you might read about 50 of them, or maybe even only 10. But what happens when people read books is they don't like, I will always take three things and it will only be three things I take away. I'll put it in my notes phone and I'll get it up every single day. Like, this is what I'm going to do,
Hmm.
because otherwise you just forget and it doesn't stay in
Absolutely.
your conscious thought. So I think it's important to do it to a point, by which then you don't even need to think about it because you've done it so much, it then becomes natural.
This is so good. This is why you'll see at the end of the episode, I'm giving people homework. So it's basically usually 3 things that I want them to take away from the episode, because I've realized it myself, listening to other podcasts, that I'll be like getting super exciting, like seeing ideas, blah, blah, blah. And then the end of the episode, I'll be like, what just happened? Like I would literally not remember anything that I just listened to, especially if I'm like listening to it while doing something else. I mean, clearly there is not a problem with that, right? So like should be multitasking. But what I wanted, the next question I wanted to ask is, how did you come to the idea of those social polls, I guess? Was that just like something that came to like this, or was it more of an observation?
Yes, very good question. So it all stemmed from us noticing that on social media that polls are 5 times more engaging than other features. And if we think about what TikTok did, well, TikTok took short form video, which existed on any other platform. You could post it on Instagram, you could post it on YouTube, but they knew that short form video is the most engaging type of video. They took that and they built an entire app around short form video, which sounds like a no brainer right now. If we think of a time, like, you had Vine that failed, they couldn't make it work. And it's such a no brainer now, but it wasn't at the time. So we were like, okay, what's the equivalent in like, opinion sharing, writing text? It's polls. Like polls are that, and they're so much more engaging. So you can take polls and then build an app around how engaging polls are. So the idea all came from that very first insight. And then to put some numbers to it, well, were we proved right? Yes, we were, because our average engagement rate on the platform is 59%. The average engagement rate for Instagram is 4.7%.
I was going to say, how much did you say?
59. 59%.
As experienced head of growth, I can say this is outstanding.
Yeah.
And for B2C also.
Yeah. It's crazy as well, because so that just to kind of clarify what I mean by that. So that's for every poll. So on our feed, let's say every 100 people vote in that poll, have seen that poll, 59 will vote in that poll. Whereas on Instagram, for 100
the amount
people,
of impressions versus people,
exactly, yeah. So it's really high. So it kind of proved our thesis. And what we want to do now, so we built the MVP launch now version 2 in the next couple of weeks, is actually like grow and expand on that. And it's okay. People love sharing their opinions. They love voting in polls. So how do you then apply that to like bring other features into that and use the fact that actually you can share your opinion so easily on a poll, because you don't have to write your opinion. If you think about a tweet, if I have to go craft a tweet and say, I think this, I'm probably not going to do it.
Right.
Especially
Too
Gen
much
Z.
effort. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like 75% of them won't post their opinion on Facebook or Twitter. But if you vote in a poll, it's super easy. So you can then start bringing other features into it because it's so easy to share your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I'm going to bring in a feature which it will tell you how similar you and your best friend are. So every week you'll get a list of polls and you'll both vote in them, and you'll have to guess what they voted, and it will tell you whether you're improving or not improving your bond with this person. So you could even do it as a couple, you're sat there both voting in polls. Do you know, how well do you know them? And is this getting better over time, or is it getting worse?
This is super cool. So you also have like a gamification
Exactly, yeah.
thing in it. Okay. So were you constantly just like on the lookout of an idea to implement, or was it just more so, how to call it, situational?
Yeah, no, so it was very much more opportunistic. So when we actually had the idea, it was COVID. I'd come off the back of spending about a year building another startup. We took to market and then decided to quit, which was a very bad decision on my part, deciding to quit it. But you learn, and you learn for the next one. So
why was the bad decision, if you don't mind?
I think we'd have absolutely smashed it. It was 2019 when ESG in the financial markets was becoming the next hot topic. I kind of saw quite early on that happening, purely from a personal passion, actually. And then it just like every week was more stuff. And even got to a point where I was signed up to, on my Bloomberg terminal, like every single alert that anyone ever mentioned ESG, I'd get flagged to it. And like tracking the number each week. Um, and the platforms that existed at the time, the business models just made no sense because you'd pay me as a company to rate you, which we all know from 2009, Fitch, Moody's, what happened when companies
Right.
paid for ratings.
Right.
So like this is happening in ESG. There should be a different business model. We built all our own models to ESG analysis is really good. When it came to go to market, I was still working at the time, and I basically knew I had to quit my job. And I just didn't have I didn't know about the VC route. So we built this product. I'm like, let's go out to market and make money from it. And raising money.
Do you have the tech background, or did you have a co-founder?
So it was me and another guy. It was all like somewhat, like all good techies in the beginning, like put together and very writing a lot of
So like a
VBA.
Frankenstein of different
Exactly.
things. Okay.
A lot of VBA in Excel.
Okay.
And then we went to market, and I knew I had to quit my job, but I didn't. I didn't, and it a huge regret because in hindsight, if I'd have known what I know now, would have gone out, raised money, and I'd have been very fine to quit my job because
Right.
I wouldn't have died. And then, it was just a great idea. The timing was right. It was coming up to that, just after COVID, where, the VC was, the market was just on fire. So raising was super easy. And it was a good business, and I was really passionate about it. So it's a shame, but yeah, and I think the worst thing that happened off the back of that was the person I was building it with became a bit burnt out after that, and just didn't ever want to do anything again.
I
Quite
see.
sad.
But I think you just said something super important. You basically said I wouldn't have died either way. Like even if it didn't work out, and I think this is what people do not realize most of the time. It's like when I coach founders and they're like, oh, they're like upcoming founders, like not sure.
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, always think about the worst case scenario. Say, okay, you quit your job and you spend 6 months doing this. By the way, do you have the money to keep going for 6 months and like not have any income? So it's like at the end, this comes down to the numbers, like your personal financials and your comfort level. As in, are you able to scale back your spendings to like have a bigger runway of your personal money? And it's like, what's the worst case scenario? I mean, obviously it's different when you have a family, blah, blah. It's like, I'm not even going to bring that into discussion, but that's what I usually, that's the same speech that I give over and over again to founders. I'm like, okay, so tomorrow you run out of money. What's going to happen? Like, this is the question. Like, are you going to die? Like, is that
it's
the
funny.
worst?
Yeah, it's funny because my view on it and like I'd always say, so I went 29 months without taking a salary, and I was very, very broke for pretty much most of that time. And I just kind of always thought,
That's with Apollo?
for Zoplo,
Okay.
29
Zoplo,
months.
sorry. Mm-hmm.
This is the first month. September was the first month I took a salary since I started
Ooh,
in
wow.
summer 2022. But I kind of realized once you
Head
realize
off.
you're not, thank you. But once you realize you're not going to die, and I mean that in a real practical sense, that like
Mm-hmm.
no one is going to let me die of starvation. And once you kind of realize that, you suddenly become way more free because it's like you kind of like it sounds stupid, it sounds crazy. But you let people like, how are you going to pay the rent next month, etc. I'm like, no idea. Like, you're not stressed. I'm like, you know what? I just have a feeling the universe isn't going to let me die. And I just like that faith. And don't get me wrong, so it's horrible. Like not taking a salary it
Of
affects you
course.
badly.
You're just burning through all your savings, and then, like at the end, they're like, "Well, shit,
Yeah,
now
but
it needs to work."
but I do think that it's like there's a very good quote, and it's you know you ask you'll ask someone what they're scared of, and you're like, well, what's on the other side of fear? And it's usually nothing. Like usually, what most people are scared of is the actual thought itself, rather than the thing, because it's fine, and any founder will know it when something really bad happens. You can go outside and the next day and it's sunny. You go to a park and the birds are singing and everyone's enjoying life, and you're like, huh, it's just it doesn't matter. Like it obviously does matter, but it just doesn't. Like the world is going to keep on spinning. In 1,000 years, less than 1,000 years, 100 years, you're going to be dead and gone. No one's going to remember you. maybe someone who's doing
Right.
a family history. But other than that, it's the universe, the world will keep turning.
This is what I usually recommend for imposter syndrome. It's like, because it's also fear, right?
Mm.
And I usually say, okay, do you have like concrete, solid evidence that people think that you're not qualified?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say like 95% of the time, people will be like, I'm like, so this
Mm.
is in your head. You're literally like, there is like no evidence that people think that you're a loser, whatever, you're not, you have no credentials. Like, you're just actually so, okay, I don't want to spiral into this whole thing, but I've been reading this book that's called, hold on, I have it in French. It's like The Courage of Not Being Liked or
Mm.
Loved, I guess, depending on the translation. It's written by this Japanese author, which is like super rare to read, and it's supposed to be a business book, sort
Yeah.
of. And the whole thing is based on, so it goes like, it's a philosopher talking to a younger student, and the younger student is basically saying, people cannot change and not
Mm.
everybody can be happy. And philosopher is like, total bollocks. Like,
Mm.
no, everybody can change. And it comes down to two, I guess, psychology school. So Freud, which is like the base of everyday psychology today. It's like there is always a cause and there is always a result. And there's Adler. By the way, I had no idea there was like a completely different
Mm.
school of psychology. He's basically saying there is no cause and result. There is our goal and what we choose to do for that goal. So a quick example that I've learned from this book is, for example, somebody who is like scared of getting out of their house.
Mm.
So according to Freud's psychology, there is some trauma, underlying trauma that have resulted into it. But Adler is saying no. This person has decided that he doesn't want to leave the house, has
Mm.
invented a fear of
Yeah.
whatever, being judged, blah, blah, blah. But
Mm.
his actual goal is to get sympathy from other people.
Yeah.
So that's why he's in the house. And it's just like blew my mind. It's like, whoa, if you see it from this perspective, then the whole imposter syndrome is actually a tool of not doing something that you want to do
Mm.
from some
Mm.
other whatever. It's like it gave me a completely different perspective. Sorry, it was like such a long speech, but I was just excited to share it.
It's so interesting as well because I've never had imposter syndrome. I think I'm far from it, and I can't. I'll tell you offline about my view on like when I've spoken to people, like the attitude I think people should have towards it. It's um because I think a lot of the time as well, it's people hold other people in too high regard, and I think it actually does them a disservice. And I feel like once you kind of realize that all these great people who, you might be in a room with, let's say you're pitching for the first time and you're with all these great people and then imposter syndrome hits in,
Mm-hmm.
I can't do this, I'm not that person. I also feel like there's certain there's certain things you can tell yourself which I think help a lot. But yeah, I think it's interesting. It's really interesting, as I said, because of someone who's never really had it, or I haven't had it to a degree where I've ever think it's affected me. Like I might have had it at times where it's been absolutely true, and I'm like, I'm probably not qualified to do this, but I'm going to go do it anyway. I don't feel like I haven't been qualified to do it, um, but yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think actually when people think about imposter syndrome. Well, I think people need to think about, well, why do you feel the way you do? Like, what is it that, like, just be honest with yourself and why do you feel like this? Is it because, uh, uh like I said, you actually like want sympathy and isn't actually to do with a kind of self-worth argument? Is it something else? Is there something else you're feeling and
Right,
thinking that
right.
you're not actually getting to the root cause of? Um, yeah, it's quite interesting.
I feel like that we've deviated so much from my original question. And the question was, so how did you come up with the idea and how it has developed ever since? Because I'm like super curious to know that.
Yeah, so yeah, as I mentioned, the idea came from seeing how popular polls were on
Mm-hmm.
social media,
Mm-hmm.
and then when we launched, so we actually had quite an interesting journey because when we launched, nothing happened. We had no money. Nothing happened. Couldn't get users.
But you decided to carry on this time.
Yeah, very. So
What
it
was
was
different?
So it was April 2023. We just launched and we had about 500 people download the app because of the waiting list I'd built together. A lot of people I know, secondary connections, some growth hacks
Mm-hmm.
I've tried. They've got us a few signups. Um, but then nothing really happened. And June and July didn't really get any downloads. And I was like, huh. Okay. And I knew I was like, I need to have any money to use ads. So I need to get organic acquisition for this to work. Basically, I need to become really good at TikTok. So I was like, well, I'm going to book to go to the
Are you
US.
a TikTok influencer now?
So now we've had about 40 million views on TikTok.
Oh, okay.
But we use a growth hack. So it's not actually me in the videos. But yeah, 40 million organic views in just over the last year. Um, a lot of videos, probably 10 plus videos with more than 1 million views. Um,
Okay, I distracted you again.
yeah,
So,
no, but actually, so before then, like I'd never really used TikTok. I was pretty shit on it. None of my content was working. So I went to the US for 6 weeks. Went to San Fran. I was like, okay, this is maybe my last shot at trying to make this happen. And I went with the intention of trying to raise money. So we just
Mhm.
went, didn't know anyone, went to the Bay Area. So stayed in San Jose in someone's shed. Managed to rope one of my friends into coming along with me. And we commuted in, we'd go inside Palo Alto, took a sign, which was like British founder looking for advice. And I just walk around with this sign and like tried going to events. Literally, we just go to bars and tried chat to anyone we could. We actually, this is really cringy and embarrassing, but I went to Meta's HQ and I was like, I'm just going to stand outside Meta's HQ with this sign. But little did I know that it's you. So if you ever go to Meta's HQ, you can't actually like get in anywhere because it's all like self-contained and it's all people drive there. So there's no one like walking in and out of it. So we were just there, and the security guard felt bad for us, and he was like, "Yeah, you can go sit in the guard, like Meta's garden." So we just sat
Oh
there,
my
and
God.
it felt like nothing had worked. It felt like we hadn't managed to get any conversations we wanted. But I listened to a podcast from a guy who lived in San Fran, and it was because I was trying to get him to meet with us. I'd listened to one of his podcasts, and he had some guests on there talks about their TikTok strategy, which then I took inspiration from that and started changing what we were doing, and that started working for us. And then about 2 months later,
So
I
what
had
was the
first.
hack? If you want to
So
share it, of course.
yeah, it was loads. So what I'll say to this is follow me on LinkedIn because I post everything on there. Because it would probably take me like an hour to explain all the nuance of it.
Well, we'll drop the link to the LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, but if anyone's interested, I post pretty much everything we do from a marketing perspective onto LinkedIn, including like all the advice strategies. So follow me on there. Um, but yeah, that going to the US led me to listen to a podcast that led me to listen to the TikTok working, and it was just quite strange. So the journey was strange because we launched, nothing happened. It felt like it was falling apart. Took one last shot of a dartboard. It didn't hit how we thought it would, but it still hit.
But you saw some traction. Okay.
And then we took
Hmm.
off, and then we started, getting the strategy started working. We started getting 10,000 downloads a month, etc., without spending any money. And now we've had over 76,000. Haven't spent any money on doing it as well.
Do you think the regret from not going to market with the first startup fueled your like, okay, I'm really, really gonna go to the end of it with the second one?
Absolutely, yeah. It was because I felt like we failed because of my probably inaction, and it was probably like I convinced myself because I was scared of doing it, and I convinced myself I shouldn't do it because I was scared, and I think that gives you such good. I actually read an article that changed my life as well in this period. It probably won't change anyone else's life, but it had such a profound impact on me. It's basically,
Right.
everyone's heard of it. It's talking about doing hard things, and you initially have this huge rush of this exciting, a shiny new object. You then come crashing down when you realize actually what's required and how hard it is, and you get stuck in this period where everything's just hard because you're trying to build momentum, and people usually quit here. And the issue is if you quit here every time, you're never going to do great things because that period will always be there. So that combined with knowing that we failed because I was scared to do what I needed to do meant when I came to Zopla, I was like, if we fail, it's because the metrics for underlying fundamentals of it don't work. Is never going to be because I haven't gone and done what is needed to do. So yeah, it made me go all in and go 29 months without salary, do crazy things like travel to the US and stay in someone's shed.
I
Um,
have to tell you though that this is something that I've heard from a very wise person a while ago. he told me that sometimes you need to change your geographic coordinates like drastically for the things to like realign for you. And he told me that when I was shit on in debt in the US after I think a couple of years of living there, and I was like so close to saying, screw it, I'm going back
Yeah.
home. Because it was never my purpose to just like no matter what say in the US. I just wanted to try. And I was like, doesn't work
Yeah.
out. I'm not gonna like, serve tables. No judging of
Yeah.
people
Yeah. Yeah.
serving tables, but you see what I'm trying to say. And so and I went to Israel to actually see an ex, weird thing. And while I was there, a phone call came through from a recruiter who was recruiting for Oracle out of all companies. I didn't even know what Oracle was. And I was like so unfazed by him calling. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll have an interview with them. And then just the whole thing spiraled. And next thing I knew, I had a stellar career after being fired from a sales job
Yeah.
previously. But all that it took is just that, like, just taking that trip because nothing was working. I was applying to like thousands of things. I was not getting a call back from anywhere. And then all of a sudden, a recruiter from Oracle, and my resume wasn't even like fit for the position. I didn't even know how or why he found me, but I was like, yeah, man, I'll learn whatever it takes. So I up to today, I know a lot of people for whom it was the case. They just needed to change the location, but drastically, not just go to like,
Yeah.
another town in the same country, but just like go wildly to the right or to the left or, down south. And I find this super interesting.
I completely agree. I think it's just change as well helps you think about things in different ways and connect dots
Right.
that might not have been there.
Exactly.
And sometimes like I just think as well, I'm a big believer in like serendipity and trusting in the universe. And I know it sounds cringy and a lot of people like will take the opposite view, but I do think that sometimes it's like you just need to do and go and trust the universe will work itself out for you without like exactly knowing how. You can just like, go to another country, do something completely different, like change something in life, and the universe will figure it out for you. Um, yeah, I'm a big believer in that.
Isn't that the basic principle of manifestation? Next thing I know, Tom has like a super famous account on TikTok on manifestation. He's actually a manifestation coach, and I'm just interviewing him about the app. um, if you don't mind, do you have like a couple of examples from your app of just like super weird or like unseen polls that people would run? Because I understand you must be analyzing some of the data, right?
Yes, so a couple of good polls. Some funny polls are: for £1,000, would you take a bath in roast beef gravy? And 77% of people from over 3,000 people that voted said they would do that for £1,000.
Jeez.
Uh, here's a here's a slightly controversial one, but we're going to throw it out there because we love a bit of Gen Z controversy. So we posted a poll. On average, how good looking are English people? Their options were very attractive, meh, or ugly, and 59% of people think English people are meh, and then 12% think they're ugly. So the consensus is English people, unfortunately, were not very attractive, according to other. And bearing in mind for our app, so we're in 182 countries, and like we're very geographically spread across Europe. So yeah, the consensus is English people. We've not been given the gift of beauty, unfortunately.
I'm sorry, guys. Maybe it's the absence of sun,
It's probably just wanting to get in baths of roast beef gravy, to be honest.
I think those two go hand in hand, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh. All right, I know we're coming up to an hour now, and there's always one question that I ask at the end, and you might have answered it already, but feel free to throw something else in.
Hmm.
Up to today, what's your no, actually, let me rephrase it. Um, what is the one thing that you know today that you would want to share with yourself like 5 or 10 years ago, whatever like the suiting timeline is?
Yeah, I think this is going to sound really, really complete opposite of what anyone would ever say on a podcast or being an entrepreneur. But stop focusing on careers and like focus like first of all on your love life, because that will dictate so much happiness in your life. I probably definitely did the wrong way around. I was thinking about my career up until probably even like very, very, very recently. And like it just leaves you with like you don't derive as much happiness from a career as you do from another person. So I think have that as a priority and don't put that on a backbench while you focus on doing 10 other things and trying to climb that ladder. So I'd say that focus on your love life rather than a career from an early stage. Because if that falls into place, the second will be a lot easier to do. Um, and then the second piece of advice I'd give to myself probably 5 years ago and maybe 10 years ago, leaving uni, would be to enjoy the ride. And it sounds, so cliche, but it's funny because I had a walk with a friend the other day and we were talking about like everything we've done here at Zopla. And without wanting to sound arrogant, he was like saying, so impressive. I'd never thought you'd been able to do that like when you first launched it. But to me, I don't think we've ever celebrated. I mean, we haven't ever celebrated any of our wins.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's something I look at now and it's something I really want to change. And I've celebrated any of my wins really in finance, of breaking into banking, this kind of thing. And I just think it's something we forget that life's quite short. It can be over quite quickly. Nothing's that important. So enjoy the ride.
You're gonna make me cry now. No, seriously, the first one really hit home because it also, this is something that I've struggled with recently in terms of I have like I shared 2 small kids, 2 and 4, and I felt this entire time, as in since the day that the first one was born, that it has all to be about money. I'm like, oh, I just need like an X amount of money, of money, and then I finally realized, no, I actually just want to spend more time with them, and if that means making more money, then this is what needs to happen. But I've just finally, like literally a few weeks ago, said to myself, okay, I don't want to work more than 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
Like maybe even less if I can, so I can actually focus on the kids. And you know what? All the ideas and everything else start coming so much easier to me because I finally just like switched the angle, And when I was in London last week, because I live in the south of France, there is like no business or startup community. So very often it feels very isolating. It's like so hard to find that entourage here. And when I was in London, I was like, yeah, I feel alive. Oh my God, like maybe we should move here or maybe I should come here more often. And that was during the day. And in the evening, I would come to the empty hotel room all by myself without my husband or kids. And I was like, no, fuck it. Just like, I'd rather be at home and maybe feel isolated and maybe have LinkedIn friends, as I call them, But it's just like, this is so important. And I think thank you so much for bringing this up because it's very rare that I think your preface was saying, I feel like it's very like unusual to say it on the business podcast.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because like a lot of founders are in like happy relationships, so they don't understand that, if that makes sense. Like maybe they'll say it, but they don't understand the opposite. Like I've been single for the last couple of years and I've been definitely focusing on a startup, deliberately, intentionally being like, I don't want to be in a position where I have to then sacrifice, I might want to work on a Sunday or this kind of thing.
Right.
So I kind of seen that side and I'm like, it then puts in perspective and I think it's hard sometimes to appreciate like what you have and why that is a good thing to have when you have it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep.
Like I'm sure if Zoplo had a failed, probably have some great lesson I'd be telling myself right now about appreciating it. Or I don't know what that would be, but does that make sense? But because I've got
it makes
running
sense.
the startup now, it's hard to get that perspective because I have it.
Exactly, because I mean, as generous human beings, we don't appreciate what we have
Yeah.
until it's either taken away from us or we just like are able to see a different perspective, which is usually when that is getting taken away from us.
Yeah. Usually when it's all going wrong.
Exactly. All right. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of the episode, I like to give homework to the listeners at the end so they can process in a better way what we've just talked about, and B, actually go do something afterwards. So it has to be something like actionable. So not like, for example, I don't know, like go write out your life plan. Obviously, nobody's gonna do that after listening to a podcast. But what out of everything we have discussed, what would be like 2 or 3 pieces of homework that you would give to the listeners?
2 3 pieces of great question. I love this. Can there be anything?
Anything.
First of all, call your parents right now and just say thank you for raising me, thank you for everything you did, and tell them you love them, and just do it completely out of the blue. You'll make their day. You'll absolutely make their day. The second piece of homework, which will make this more like startup and business related, is to go post that first piece of content you're scared of posting. And I know this kind of probably seems like it's coming randomly out of the blue, but having grown all the organic views on TikTok that got all the downloads, honestly, you're going to make some rubbish stuff. Like whether it's a LinkedIn post, a TikTok video, whatever it might be, if it's for your startup or personal, but go do that. And don't worry if it's good or not. Just get out there and do it. And then the third piece of homework we'll give to listeners is to go help someone. Go help someone like on LinkedIn. So when I say help, what I mean by this is you'll know loads of people. If you watch this stuff, you'll come across loads of people who, and this isn't self-promotion, go download my app, but go do it. Find someone who's launching a venture, who's trying to do a small business, go buy something from them, go help them, go support them, go share their stuff on your Instagram. Because it makes all the difference. When people are starting out, those small wins make a huge difference, more than you will ever know. So that is my third piece of homework. So call parents, tell them thank you and you love them. Second, post some content. Third, go help someone who's starting a venture or a small business.
You're like a messiah or something. No, seriously, it's like some of those things. I'm like, oh my God, like, whoa, I feel like I just interviewed a monk or something, No, seriously, I'm definitely going to call my parents. I'll promise you this. The second one I've been struggling with, but I'm doing it because what I've realized is just has to be consistent. No matter what you do, it just has to be consistent. You just got to ship it off. And like, just like, don't be obsessed with results. This is also what it's like a thing that everybody just needs to get through their heads. Like, you're never going to get early results. You're never going to like blow up overnight, etc. And I think the third one is, I think what I've heard from all the founders that I've coached was that having a mentor or somebody that basically like helped them out in the early days meant a lot more or helped them a lot more rather than like reading 10,000 articles and books and etc. or like doing all that work themselves. So thank you so much. I think this was one of the best pieces of homework we've had so far. I'm like not exaggerating. And I think the call the parents thing, please seriously, everybody call your parents. I need to do it myself. When was the last time you called your parents?
But so have I called my parents today? I call my mum every day.
Okay.
Well, actually, I tell a lie. Some days I don't because I'm quite tired, but not like having an early night. I call my mum just to say night, like if it's 2 minutes. Yeah, and I'm just going to leave people on that because it is so important. Life is short, and you'll regret when they're not around. So everyone get out there and tell them you love them, call them.
This is so beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We're gonna tag your app and all of your social media profiles in the description of the episode. Is there one action that you want people to take if they download your app and decide to do something?
Not particular. I think if anyone wants to chat, like if anyone's thinking about going to start that venture, anyone's doing a startup at the minute, that kind of a similar stage. I always, love meeting people for coffee, a pint, whatever that might be, even virtual. Like I said, I've got a lot of LinkedIn friends as well. So even if it's just a virtual coffee, reach out. And this is a good bit of advice as well. People who do podcasts and this kind of thing, and they go out there, they tend to be people who are receptive to being cold messaged and just ask to like chat and meet and build rapport with. So always use it. If you ever watch a podcast, other than maybe it's a 20VC podcast, and it's one of the most famous guests on the planet, like Mark Zuckerberg.
Right.
Those people, because they're probably people who are receptive to networking and building connections.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. Tom, thank you so much for coming into the show. I feel like I need to do a second episode with you sometime down the road. Or just to check in with you to see how you're doing, because I'm now super excited to see what's going to happen with the social polling app. How do you describe it in one sentence?
Yes, it changes depending on who asks, but social polling app is spot on.
Okay. Thank you so much again. And well, see you next time.
Yeah. See you in a bit. Thank you very much.